Jasmine. I'm Tom. Oh, that always startles me. Uh, yeah, Tom Elliott, energy analyst at the Oregon Department of Energy, also known as ODO. Among my various duties, I work on a rural and agricultural energy assistance program, and we help producers understand and identify different energy efficiency opportunities that they can pursue, and that may or may not involve an energy assessment on site. And then we as well help them sort of navigate through the space of understanding energy options, refer them to resources, and navigate the space, which may include incentives such as the USDA REAP incentive. Regarding agrivoltaics, we haven't had a lot of folks that ask us directly about agrivoltaics, but there has been quite a bit of interest in solar, and a lot of folks, producers, are interested in both solar and energy efficiency as ways to improve their bottom lines. Regarding agrivoltaics specifically, my colleague Wendy Simons and I had the pleasure of going to see Chad Higgins, OSU, Oregon State University North Willamette Research Center, one of his projects there. It was very enlightening to me to kind of see it on site and to ask just a ton of questions. Then as well, Wendy wrote an Energy 101 piece on our 2024 biennial energy report on agrivoltaics. And I was just reading that again, and it's just agrivoltaics is a topic that just gets broad and deep in so many different areas. So I'm my pleasure to introduce our first presenter, and that's going to be Kristen France, who is a project manager at NYSERDA. I'll let her fill in a little bit more on her background and what she's going to present on. Kristen?
Great. Thanks so much, Tom. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak with and learn from you today. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. So, as Tom said, I'm a project manager at NYSERDA with the Environmental Research Group. And I'm an interdisciplinary scientist by my original training with kind of a range of experience working on conservation and innovation at nonprofits and now at NYSERDA. Um, for just a little bit more on NYSERDA, I imagine most of you know, but NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, is a public benefit corporation with a mission of catalyzing New York's clean energy transition to support a healthier and thriving future for all New Yorkers. And NYSERDA really kind of serves New York State as a resource for energy information, policies, and programs. So the State Energy Office. You can go to the next slide. Thanks, Jasmine. I sit on the environmental research team, which is a team within NYSERDA's policy analysis and research group. And really, our team's purpose is to provide sound, current scientific research to inform decision making relative to energy related environmental policies and goals. And we do a variety of things, but I manage our land based renewables research portfolio. And so agrivoltaics falls under my research portfolio. And I'm going to talk a lot more about that today. To set the scene a little bit, you can go to the next slide. Um, just for general context in New York, New York has ambitious renewable energy goals, and while the sort of numbers and deadlines and approach are a subject of active current debate in the state legislature, the New York State Energy Plan calls for 24 more gigawatts of solar by 2040. And to get this could be community-based solar, which New York sort of leads the nation in implementing, so smaller scale projects. But in the queue, a lot more is likely to be large scale solar, so utility scale. That is affected by and governed by a sort of statewide permitting process at the Department of Public Service. And there, if there's an impact on more than 30 acres of land, there is a requirement for an agricultural mitigation payment. So that is just sort of context for solar energy and ag. And you can go to the next slide. In terms of the agricultural context within New York, agriculture is really important within New York. And there's been a lot of questions and concerns about the intersection of solar development and agricultural land. It's been pretty prominent. There's about 6.5 million acres in production in New York, which is about 22% of the state's land area. And as just for additional context, about 68% of the state is in forest land, and a lot of that is protected as part of the Adirondacks Forest Preserve or Catskills Forest Preserve. So the ag land, unsurprisingly, flat lands compared to a lot of the rest of New York's topography, and is close to transmission because the transmission lines got sited around waterways and in flat areas. So key interest for solar development. So you can go to the next slide. So in recognition of this and the importance of agricultural lands and industry, in 2021, the legislature established a farmland protection working group to kind of have state agencies and county farmland protection boards and local governments think about how to advise on siting. And NYSERDA helped establish and facilitate a multi-stakeholder independent advisory body, the Agricultural Technical Working Group, which you will probably hear me call the ATWIG. And this is a group, it's got several representatives from each of these stakeholder groups, and it's supported by technical and facilitation contracting. And its goal is to advise, and purpose is to advise and guide the state and others in understanding and managing the interactions between renewable energy development and agricultural lands and communities. So unsurprisingly, ATWIG has prioritized agrivoltaics as a focus, and they have an agrivoltaics specialist committee. And the work of that committee and the perspectives they've provided were really a key catalyst in terms of our NYSERDA is launching into doing agrivoltaics research and demonstration projects. You can go to the next slide. So, the ATWIG had really stressed the importance of having agrivoltaics research and demonstration sites in New York that farmers could visit and learn from. And so we started that interest, and environmental research stepped up to house it because of the nexus sort of with knowledge and learning and evidence to support policy. And so now we have a newly named Sun and Soil program. New York's governor identified it as a priority in our State of the State address this year. And so we have funding and scope, and this program is going to be implemented by NYSERDA in collaboration with New York Ag and Markets and advised by the ATWIG. And it's going to focuses on increasing options for farmers to benefit from solar energy integration while continuing to maintain valuable land assets. And we're doing this by kind of examining different means of integrating agriculture operations and clean energy siting so we can build an understanding of the costs, benefits, and market potential of co-locating these kind of two essential industries in New York. It's being funded through regional greenhouse gas initiative proceeds, and it's currently allocated $10 million. So that's just the context. And so it's really building upon, you can go to the next slide, our initial agrivoltaics research and demonstration project portfolio, which is really kind of just getting off the ground. We have 4 projects under contract and likely another to begin this year. And with those projects, we've awarded and anticipate awarding about over $2.5 million in response to the first competitive solicitation we issued in 2024. And the purpose of this research and demonstration projects was to really learn and demonstrate agronomic viability and to understand the costs and the benefits. And our approach, we wanted to sort of utilize public-private partnerships whereby NYSERDA would fund some or all of the incremental costs. So how much harder and more costly was it to implement agrivoltaics as opposed to traditional or more conventional builds of solar arrays? In exchange for providing access for research, for sharing the lessons learned, for giving the public as well as NYSERDA access to the data, and really providing access for tours and other outreach, kind of sharing and letting folks on site to see how it's done and what they're learning from how they're implementing it. Had up to 750,000 available per project, and a wide range of projects were eligible. There was a minimum 100 kilowatt size. Next slide. To support all of these projects, we thought it'd be important to engage a research contractor to make sure that we could learn as much as possible from the projects and also establish some kind of research quality consistency of support across the projects. We didn't want the projects to be required to come with their own research capability, though some of them did. So we have a team, interdisciplinary team of agronomists, economists and sociologists at Cornell. They're going to be helping advise the projects on what data collect, helping do that supplemental data collection, doing structured interviews, and also doing research in the communities about community perceptions. And that's just the name of the researchers there. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. So I want to tell you a little bit about this, the projects in this initial portfolio. United Agrivoltaics is a project they've called their project Farmstead Solar, and this is a company that has been doing solar grazing for quite a number of years and has really kind of been leading the way in a lot of regards in that arena. They're trying pigs and poultry intermixed with sheep grazing on conventionally built solar arrays, both on a couple of different sites, some fixed and some single access tracking. And they're also trying specialty crops, including mushrooms and herbs growing under the panels. And just FYI, shiitake mushrooms grow extremely well on wood chips under panels. And Caleb at United Agrivoltaics has some great video about their first half field season. They started in July. You can go to the next slide. Lightstar Renewables, they finished building a project last summer, their Plains Road project, and the landowner farmer was able to harvest a cut of hay just a month and a half or a couple months after the end of construction using traditional equipment because this is widely spaced single access tracking arrays. And they did such soil protective construction practices. They didn't grade the site, and so they were able to get a cut of hay off pretty quickly. This farmer is also leasing 2 acres to a tenant vegetable farmer, and they're going to start growing this field season. So we're excited about that. Next slide. KNMH Farms is a farmer-led project. They're building a small solar array on an established pasture, and they're integrating it with battery storage to power their dairy and grain processing operations. In addition to expecting sort of the energy cost benefits to pay off for them fairly quickly because of the rising cost of energy and the energy intensity of their grain processing and dairy operations, they're hoping that the shade from the panels benefits the animals and the pasture. And they did really soil protective construction practices over the winter on very hard ground, and the farmer's really optimistic it's going to green up right away this spring. So they did a number of site practices in terms of minimizing the amount of disturbance to the pasture. And next slide. The fourth project, the New York Power Authority is going to construct an array on the State University of New York Cobleskills campus. Cobleskill is one of the main agricultural schools in the state, and it has a long history of active farming operations and an active dairy operations on the campus, as well as doing research associated with it. So students and faculty are going to be involved in doing the research and in sort of running the agricultural operations within the array. And they're going to incorporate rotational grazing and row crops in an elevated array, and it's still in the planning. This is still very much in the planning phase. So to be constructed, I think 2028. And next slide. And if I still have time, I just want to share some of the early lessons that we've been learning. First, I think we've been learning the sort of value in really in supporting developers and farmers to deeply collaborate and figure out what works. And so for future RFPs, we're kind of thinking about how can we enable them to be creative, make sure we're still learning from it, but kind of minimize the constraints because when they are collaboratively problem solving together, that's where a lot of the great things are happening. We've also heard already that participating has already helped developers grow their internal resources and capacity to design and construct other agrivoltaic projects. One thing that we're interested in is several of these projects, have companies or somebody playing a role that's really understands both solar and really understands the farmers' concerns. And there's sort of a communication bridge to helping the developers understand what's really going to work for the farmer and vice versa. And that seems to be an important and valuable role. And we're wondering about ways to kind of build that capacity, find out if it is indeed critical and ways to build that capacity. Not surprisingly, soil protective practices make a big difference, but we're hoping that having more stories and examples and enabling folks to learn from this will really help people see what's possible with some adjustments, and also help developers understand that this is doable, and we can get more of an understanding sort of at what cost. And as another piece of that, really having somebody on site regularly, not just like once a month, but before and during construction, to really advocate for the soil protective practices during construction to help everybody who's on site understand the importance and how to do it. We're hearing that that's just been vital and has been kind of key to these initial project success. And so we're thinking about how to scale that. Next. So in terms of like what's next for us, we do have a request for information out right now. It's due April 30th, and this is to inform future program offerings for the Sun and Soil program. We want to hear from a wide range of stakeholders on questions sort of at this nexus of, of farmers, farming, and integrating solar energy. So certainly agrivoltaics, but also thinking about solar power for farms and integrating that with battery storage. We're thinking about what are their challenges of equity of access by farmers to the opportunity to work with solar developers and get that sort of stable lease payment as a way for their operations. So if you're interested, please do check out the RFI. There's a link here and I can send it around. There's a wide range of questions. We're really looking for a lot of input. We anticipate having future solicitations informed by that request for information. We're looking forward to our first full growing field season with the projects and collecting lessons learned and data all along the way and kind of trying to share those out rapidly to folks that are interested in learning and hearing from them and within New York and beyond. Further in the offing, we're also hoping to develop a data sharing portal and website. I do also want to name that we are working with Cornell to construct agrivoltaics arrays on 2 of their agricultural experiment station sites in New York, one in the Hudson Valley, which will focus on high density apple orchards and panels above those, and another on or near Cornell's campus, which will be focused more on row crops and specialty sort of arrays. So the interest there is with the experiment stations, we can try stuff that's even earlier proof of concept. It has staff and faculty sort of already engaged. And so they can experiment with technologies or other crops or varietals or things that are, even further in the offing. And also we can have the benefit of sort of long-term research potential there. I have a couple other slides, but they're more sort of for questions, and so I want to do a time check. This is on the agrivoltaics experiment stations, and the next slide just talks a little bit about other relevant sort of intersection, agrivoltaics intersections. And so I think with that, I can pause.
Kristen, that was great. You froze just for a minute. Did everybody hear that, or was that just on my end because I may
Oh,
want
it's
to say more
probably
quick?
me.
Okay. Wow. That was unbelievable. That was a really great and broad and diverse set of sort of technologies, collaboration, people issues, farmer. I would definitely want to come back and revisit some of that. And if I'm out on the East Coast sometime to visit some of these sites, that's really great. So let's move on to our next panelist, also in a neighboring state, but also one that's with a large variety of terrain and sort of probably agricultural products as well. And it's my pleasure to introduce Laura Scatina, a research scientist at the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities.
Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be here. My name is Laura Scatina Amisa. I work at the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities as a research scientist. I've been working at the state of New Jersey for over 20 years in various environmental areas throughout the state, and I'm currently focused on managing the pilot program for agrivoltaics in New Jersey. Next, please. Jasmine, if you could advance the slides, thank you. So as a disclaimer, this presentation is provided for informational purposes only and should not be taken to represent the views of the board, its commissioners, or the state of New Jersey. So please be aware that any information presented is subject to change if there are changes to New Jersey statutes, rules, or policies, and all viewers are responsible for ensuring that they rely only on current legal authority regarding the matters covered in the presentation. Next, please. So I'm sure we could do a 2-day workshop. I will try to briefly cover and highlight some key areas of BPU and its pilot program, going over some program milestones, next steps, and also reviewing challenges, lessons learned, and ending with some key projects at Rutgers University. Next, please. So if you're not aware, the Board of Public Utilities is the state agency with authority to oversee the regulated utilities that provide critical services such as natural gas, electricity, water, telecommunications, and cable television. BPU ensures safe and adequate utility services that are provided at reasonable, non-discriminatory rates by developing and regulating a competitive, economically cost-effective energy policy that promotes responsible growth and clean, renewable energy sources while maintaining a high quality of life in New Jersey. So somewhat of a high bar, and it's important to understand the mission to understand where we are at the pilot program. Next slide, please. So kind of taking another step back before getting into agrivoltaics, solar is administered through the board's Division of Clean Energy, authorized by several laws and statutes listed here. I will not take the time to go into all of them. The board also has an array of development tools that support solar development in the state. So I'll be focusing obviously on the Dual Use Solar Energy Act of 2021 and the board's successor solar incentive program, or the SUSI program, that consists of two components and of which the dual use pilot program builds off of. So I would encourage you to look into more detail. We have a plethora of resources on the new Clean Energy Program website listed here to go into all of this detail if you wish to. Next slide, please. So getting into the Dual Use Energy Act of 2021 and what it does, it requires BPU to develop rules and regulations for a pilot program in New Jersey to ultimately inform a permanent program that is to become integrated with the SUSI program. So there are a couple steps here, but dual use solar, as we know, as agrivoltaics, means agricultural production and solar energy production to take place on the same farmland, right? So we're talking about co-location. So dual use solar can help New Jersey meet its clean energy goals while protecting farmland from development to non-agricultural uses. And so again, there's just simply not enough time in 10 minutes to go over all the available information that BPU in collaboration with its partners has put together. But if you visit the website listed at the top of the slide, you can find a wealth of information. Next slide, please. So as I alluded to, this pilot program has been a collaborative effort. So not only from stakeholders, but throughout the development of the pilot program, BPU consulted with other state agencies, in particular, the New Jersey Department of Agriculture and Environmental Protection. BPU has also worked closely with the Rutgers Agrivoltaics Program, or RAP, at Rutgers University. And RAP serves as a primary designer and organizer of research studies for selected projects as part of the pilot program under a grant agreement it has with the board. So BPU will continue to consult with these and other state partners to implement and evaluate the pilot program. Next slide, please. So to hone in on a little bit more detail about what the program entails, the statute permits the board to have a pilot program for 36 months with possible extensions to 48 or 60 months. So essentially the board has approved 200 megawatts of solar capacity for the 3 years, or each to be broken down by program year, or PY, for the pilot program. So program year 1 has a capacity target of 65 megawatts for project size 500 kilowatts to 10 megawatts. So the Dual Use Act does not allow any projects greater than 10 megawatts to be involved in the pilot program. So the remaining 135 megawatts may be available during future program years, as in program year 2 or PY3, depending on the board's decision for PY1. So during the first application or the solicitation for program year 1, it opened to new application submissions earlier this year in January and closed to submissions on February 25th, 2026. Each application is going to be evaluated and scored based on the evaluation criteria stemmed from the Dual Use Act that was then described in the board's order dated November 21st, 2025. All this information is broken down and available on the Clean Energy website. So the dual use pilot projects will be awarded or denied through a board order to participate in the registration process to be eligible to receive renewable energy certificates, or SRECs, as we refer to solar in the solar program. So program year 2 began on February 26th. And in terms of next steps, board approval via a board order is needed to open a solicitation. Next slide, please. So for this group, I thought it would be important to focus on the solicitation process. It is a two-step process. First, there are proposals in the form of expressions of interest, or EOIs, that the board staff provides feedback on to inform applicants whether they are pre-qualified to submit applications. So the second step in this process, which is competitive, is a full application that builds on the proposal and provides more details on the project, and includes information on how that project will meet the criteria established by the board. So in terms of this process, the board, under the Dual Use Act, is required to consult with the Secretary of Agriculture and issue its decision for each project within 180 days after receipt of the application. So essentially, in terms of next steps, the board has until August 2026 to provide decisions on the applications that were submitted in February. So in summary, the solicitation process follows the sequence as diagrammed here. So the board approves to open a solicitation round. There is a notice of incentive availability under which instructions and criteria are provided for project teams to submit their proposals or EOIs. The project teams are then notified if they're pre-qualified to move forward in the process to submit applications. Those applications are reviewed by an evaluation committee, and then the board would then notify the project teams of that decision. Next slide, please. So again, there's a lot of information on this slide, but essentially the takeaway is that siting and land use, as described by New York and others, is quite important in considering where these projects should be co-located. They, in New Jersey, have to be located on unpreserved farmland that is valued, assessed, and taxed under New Jersey's Farmland Assessment Act, and they're required to remain in active agricultural or horticultural use. So there are a number of prohibitions on where they can be sited in New Jersey, and I won't read all of that detail here, but essentially to site on these prohibited land types, they need approval by the board, and for the ones listed at the bottom, they require that a petition is submitted to request a waiver on these following on the following land types that are listed. So it is quite important, and I would like to highlight and refer to the Department of Environmental Protection's New Jersey Solar Incentive Siting Tool that's linked at the top of the slide. They have built an online mapping tool to help the public and applicants understand where siting solar energy projects would be preferable throughout the state of New Jersey, and takes into consideration the siting criteria from the board's various solar incentive programs. Next slide, please. So we are quite early in this process for the pilot program. We are we had just finished program year 1, program year 2 has started. So it is quite preliminary. The board is committed to making as many materials, data, and information available to the public as possible. Again, the pilot program has an abundance of information. I think in terms of challenges and lessons learned thus far, as with any pilot, it's a learning process. The pilot program is new and comes with a lot of challenges, including internal challenges. So the new law required the board to pass new rules that required new teams, new processes, internally, externally, new staff. We just went through, a new administration, both at the federal and state level. So these in turn result in various challenges, right, that can be expected, but some are unexpected. For example, I stepped into this role after being assigned when someone retired, right? So there's a learning process with all of this, not only with the public and the applicants and stakeholders, but also internally with all of our teams. So again, it comes with some anticipated challenges that we would expect through the rulemaking process. We have a transparent process that includes stakeholder feedback and public comment. And again, there are some challenges, that come with all of the priorities on clean energy and renewable energy that the state is trying to advance. So there are competing priorities, and all of that comes with, the daily and operational challenges. So all of this to say, it boils down to good public policy takes time to provide a maximum benefit, and the BPU does have a charge to provide the maximum benefit to ratepayers at the lowest cost. So it is a learning process, and we will provide as much information that is publicly available as time goes on. Next slide, please. Finally, I would like to spend a few moments highlighting the research project sites from the Rutgers team. Again, RAP is a multidisciplinary group of Rutgers faculty and staff committed to designing and conducting applied agrivoltaics research and outreach. Their website is provided at the top of the slide for more information. They have installed 3 agrivoltaic systems with total solar energy capacity of over 500 kilowatts. They are open, available for regular site tours. The next tour is dated for April 15th. I would encourage you to visit their website to register if you're interested. Again, there's a map that highlights the various locations throughout New Jersey, north, central, and southern New Jersey for these sites, and with a wide range of crops being tested and in different types of systems between vertical bifacial and single axis trackers. So again, there's a lot of information out there to understand what Rutgers is working on. And finally, I would note that the research results from these projects will ultimately help inform the pilot program and the development of agrivoltaics in New Jersey, and they do have separate funding sources, so they're not technically part of the board's pilot program. And next slide, please. So thank you. I appreciate your time and the opportunity to speak to you all today. I look forward. I've already have learned quite a bit from Kristen and Tom. I look forward to learning from everyone and you all as well. And to end, the Clean Energy Program and BPU have listservs for which you can sign up for to keep up to date on the pilot program and other program areas. So thank you so much. Jasmine?
Yeah, wow. Thank you, Laura. So already there's some common themes there, and it's interesting how different states are, with a common sort of objectives for achieving clean energy goals, as well as maintaining, preserving ag land, and also providing opportunities for producers to improve their profitability. And then just the incredible amount of research and different sort of examples of real life pilot projects. I think that's a wealth of opportunity. And without further ado, then we'll hear from Professor Chad Higgins, Associate Professor at Oregon State. Chad?
Thanks, Tom. Great to see everybody here, and new faces and new friends, hopefully in the future. My name is Chad Higgins. I'm an associate professor at Oregon State University, and this growing season will be my 13th growing season of agrivoltaics research coming up. So we've already done early planting because spring is arriving soon, and I'll be out planting some more on Friday and this weekend. So that's pretty fun. There was a couple bullet points that the organizers asked me to hit, and obviously there's just not enough time in a short presentation to do everything and cover all the work that we've done. But those bullet points include, the national outlook, drilling down into states and how they can work with local institutions, and then a bit of talking about what we've learned in terms of cropping systems and so on. So I'll start with the outlook. Agrivoltaics has so much potential because solar energy harvesting has so much potential. There's a lot of energy in the sun. For my entire life, I've heard that nuclear fusion research is about to get us energy independence and just one more breakthrough. And I know those folks doing that research are dedicated and may get us there one day. But the fact of the matter is we already have a fusion reactor. We just named it the sun, and we have access to its energy. And there's so much energy in the sun. 1,000 watts per square meter, which is typical sunlight on a sunny day in the areas you're talking about, is equivalent to about 6,000 horsepower per acre. Now, we can't obviously harvest all of that, but even if we harvest 10% or less, um, ask a farmer how much diesel fuel would cost to run a 100-horse tractor for a day, and they will understand why at 10% of that, 600 horsepower per acre, the value on the table that there is for growers to reinvest into their farm, and to reinvest into their communities. I think, you know, I wrote a paper a number of years back with my then PhD student Elnaz Hassanpour at a uh, and we did the calculation that 1% of ag land was more than enough to get our green energy goals, and that number has made the rounds. Um, and it hasn't changed. In fact, we rounded up. It was less than 1% when you actually do out the details. So the raw potential is there simply because there's so much energy in the fusion that we harvest from this that's harvestable from the sun. Um, Now let's put that in context with the situation on the ground right now. We went through a period of slow, near flat energy demand increase for about 15 years, nationally. That is not true anymore. Um, and I think we got used to slow and flat energy expansion expectations until about maybe 3 years ago with the advent and expansion of, I'm not going to lay it all on data centers, but there is a rapidly expanding segment of our commercial sector that requires tremendous energy inputs. Um, there's projections that that sector, data center sector, particularly associated with AI, could represent 25% of our energy demand um, 5 years from now. Right now, it's in the 5-ish% to one sig fig. So that's a 5x expansion of that capacity. Year on year at 2% energy expansion capacity, which was what we've been doing nationally, will not keep up with that demand. Um, and we're going to see a struggle to power the chips that are being created. Um, on the manufacturing side, they're trying to make those chips more efficient, but there's a thermodynamic reality to life. We all understand that you can't get something from nothing. So so that's the demand side for energy, and that I think is going to push not only the solar agenda, but the agrivoltaic philosophy and approach into the future. We lay that on top of the current political structure and how the big beautiful bill from last year, was that last year? Jeez, it seems like so long ago. Um, how that took away the energy tax credits for development nationally for utility scale solar, and implemented the safe harbor provision, which is going to expire this year. And that created or that removed an economic incentive um, for solar developers and large scale projects, and also lit a fire under their asses to get projects done quickly so they could reach the safe harbor deadline. So in this moment, we see people easily projecting spikes in demand and um, people rushing to develop large scale utility projects before the economic incentives go away. And that's the situation I live in out here in Oregon, as we have large amounts of data centers in and around the large hydropower plants. And that is largely wheat land of farms here, thousands and thousands of acres of wheat land. We layer that on top of the fact that solar panel prices are going down. And for the first time um, this year, the net present value of a solar array with battery backup is greater than that for any other technology for a data center and the reliability that they need. Now, that's quoting from Google's CEO an analysis of the situation. I didn't do that calculation myself, but I've got to verify that. Um, but these tech companies are also realizing that solar is a pathway to the future. Combining all of this together, we have massive demand for localized consumptions that are often located in rural areas, that are often surrounded by disadvantaged and poor communities. And I think we have an opportunity to lift up and invest in those disadvantaged communities with solar and with agrivoltaics. I had an effort over the past, throughout 2025. I testified to Congress and the Ag Committee in 2025 on agrivoltaics and its potential for the nation, for food security, water security, and electric security, energy security. Um, I, amongst many others, made a pitch, and I'm going to credit SAFA here, Solar and Farming Association, which is the DC lobbying group for agrivoltaics that actually exists now. Those efforts got definitionally agrivoltaics recognized as a agricultural practice in the farm bill that is yet to be voted on. So we are waiting for that vote to happen to have a statutory definition of agrivoltaics at the federal level. And I think, there's no money or anything tied to that. There's no incentives or carve-outs tied to that. However, you can't have a carve-out for something that's not defined. So the zero step is always to define the thing, and that definition is in there. Um, and national policy is great, but what we see in this webinar is that agrivoltaics is inherently place-based. The soils of New York are not the same as the soils of Oregon. I know. I mean, I'm a farm kid from upstate New York. I grew up in near Ithaca, near Cornell. Um, and you drive around there and it's all non-irrigated corn. It's all rain-fed corn. They grow things there that we cannot grow out here in that way. We could not grow rain-fed corn out here. We have to irrigate. There's different agronomic conditions out here. So it's important for states and local communities to come up and do their own research. And I'm really heartened to see the collaboration between New Jersey and Power and Rutgers and with NYSERDA and all those lovely research collaborations that you've shown. I'm going to highlight and call out also ASAGA, the American Solar Grazing Association, that's headquartered out there in the East Coast and has a strong presence. And I see the work that's done out there, and it's really, really quite inspiring. I have testified recently. When was that? That was like last month to the Connecticut House and Senate on agrivoltaics, and they have a bill under consideration now to also change their laws around siting for agrivoltaic installations, as uh, as you've correctly seen in the previous talks, that there's careful consideration that needs to be done around how these things are designed, built, and deployed. Here in Oregon, even though I've been doing this research past 12 years, going into my 13th, we are still struggling with these issues around solar siting, particularly on these large installations. And I can point to um, a large agrivoltaics proposal that's maybe 30 miles south of me on I-5 near a town called Harrisburg. the community is very divided about whether they want an agrivoltaic installation or not. And I can contrast that with a community out in Grass Valley who are very supportive of a 20,000 acre agrivoltaic facility. And, I think it's not a criticism to the state. It's just a matter of fact of the record that we don't have a cohesive siting policy around agrivoltaics. And there is a struggle with our siting commission now in terms of how to incorporate or evaluate agrivoltaics as part of a farmland mitigation plan. And uh, it's kind of being it's not being worked out in the statutes. It's being worked out in practice, I would say out here, in my opinion. Um, and that's okay because we have to move fast. If we want to maintain or increase the rate of addition to our energy grid to match these demands that are expanding faster than our than the fundamental timescale of policy. And that's just the nature of the beast. It's really hard to regulate an industry that changes faster than one legislative session. So um, so you see, we're facing the same issues out here, and we've been doing place-based research out here for a long time as well. So and I'm happy to get into the research outcomes. Uh, let's talk about that. So in the past 12 years, we've learned a couple fundamental things. One is that you can design systems that preserve land access by moderately modifying existing designs. You don't have to go into very hugely elaborate things to raise the panels. We've found that single axis rotators that rotate vertically pretty steeply are sufficient to maintain land access so long as you don't block the row access with bad cable management or misplaced fence lines or with misplaced drive shafts for your articulation needs. Um, we have found that you cannot separate shade from water demand and nutrient demand. That is, if you change the shading level, you necessarily alter the needs of the plant. And that means their water needs and their fertilizer needs, their nutrient needs. And it goes with sunlight. So the more sunlight you have, the more water and nutrients the plant has. So shade saves water and saves nutrients. Number three, you can't grow nothing with nothing. That is to say, I can reduce the plant needs to zero if I completely shade them out, but then they do not grow. So you still have to meet the minimum needs of a plant from its light level requirements. This is the so-called light saturation limit of plants or the photonic limit of plants. Each species has its own. And conveniently, at my latitude, C3 crops, the median light saturation level is about 40% less than the incoming sunlight, which matches almost one-to-one to the standard 40% ground cover ratio of a standard solar design. Um, so we've got these systems. They're not challenging to design, so the last learning, major learning, is that the economic contribution of the solar is going to be at least 10x or more of the economic contribution of the ag to the entire system. So small changes in solar design with small are required, whereas large changes in agronomic adaptation might be required. That is to say, it's more economic to have a new tractor than it is to alter the rows so you can get your existing tractor through. And I have found, and I can say this because I've come from a farming family, farmers are freaking resilient and innovative, and they're very good at adapting to changing conditions as they have been their entire lives to stay afloat as a farmer. So those are the main learnings. In terms of specific crops, um, you know, that is location specific because everything I said depends on climate and soil, available rainfall. So there might be a place where you can do rain-fed corn like upstate New York, but we certainly couldn't do that here. I can say that from a broad plant characterization perspective, there are two types of plants out there. There's the so-called C3 and C4 crops. C3 crops are the older evolutionary strain, and they are less efficient with light than C4 crops. C3 crops are therefore the more likely candidates that trend to doing better than C4 crops. They're just better choices. And as an aside, that includes all your brassicas, all your nightshades, so tomatoes, tobacco, peppers, eggplants, all your cauliflower, broccoli, cabbage, all your leafy greens, potatoes, rice, um, melons, squash. Most crops, like 90% or more crops are C3. So we have a lot of crops that are very adaptable to these conditions. So I think the outlook is good. We're just circling back. We're in an environment where energy expansion is going to be critical. Um, I've seen now whispers from our federal government that they're becoming more amenable to the solar solution, particularly now that these large tech companies have made the projections of net present value of solar for them. Um, I don't know how that's going to affect national policy, but I do know national policy changes the incentives dramatically for solar and has. I think we're going to see rapid expansion of solar, though, because of these demands. And I think a lot of that's going to be in agricultural land. And I think it would be an absolute travesty if we didn't get the word out to keep that agricultural land in production. So I am on an advocacy mission to make sure that large companies putting in large solar arrays understand that our ag lands are precious and they need to be preserved and protected, and they need to be farmed to protect them. And small changes in their array design that we talked about maintain more than 95% of the land fully accessible to machinery. Um, and and I think we can design systems that function. Oh, well, no, I don't think so. I know so because we have 3 demonstration sites in Oregon, and we just started a fourth. So I'll end with an invitation, 2 invitations. One, if you come out this way, we have tours as well, just like the Rutgers folks every month, second Tuesday of every month. The next one is next Tuesday. Um, no, not next Tuesday. That would be the first Tuesday. The next one is the 14th of next month. Uh, and the second invitation is on this mission of awareness, I have kits that I can send out to high school age children and classrooms who want to learn about agrivoltaics. It's a mini agrivoltaics experiment. It's fully instrumented. Just a couple $1,000s worth of equipment. And you can go to our website, and I'll put our website in the chat. Our publications are there, descriptions of our sites are there, and the youth engagement is there. If you have folks who you think might want to have one of these kits, let me know. I'm actually having a hard time finding enough takers for this thing. So thanks for listening, and I look forward to your questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chad. Really appreciate that. I feel like I got a graduate level course and I need to go back to the 101 sort of stuff a little bit. But let's transition quickly for a few questions. I think one of the top ones might be in and around the area of idea of economics and how to, you just talked about the cost being minimal or actually the changes being minimal, but there are going to be some additional costs. So could you maybe let's pivot back to maybe Kristen and Laura a little bit and regarding how we meet those extra costs, different approaches for that. And then also if anybody wants to drop anything in the chat.
I mean, I could start off just to give a little more background. So, part of the pilot program is to learn what costs are attributed to the agricultural and horticultural components of a project. So, the pilot program actually establishes a way for applicants to request a financial incentive to cover those incremental costs above and beyond the typical cost for a solar project. So the purpose of the pilot program includes understanding what those costs are and how to incentivize them, and move forward to a permanent program to better understand, what makes sense in New Jersey, in terms of incentives as well.
Yeah, and I can tag on. Similarly, I think that's one of the key intents of sort of our first set of research and demonstration projects, and likely others, is to get a better understanding of sort of what are the incremental costs. And I will name that, similar to what Chad said, I think we have heard from some folks that in terms of like farmers are adaptive. It's probably more feasible economically to just help them adapt, give them different equipment, than it is to rack up lots more capital expenses in terms of the design of the project. I have also heard from some developers that on some sites it actually already makes sense to space out the arrays, and or that the benefits of being able to get access to sites with good interconnection that are easy to build on through collaboration with the farmers and through enabling them to use their equipment, by making some spacing and cabling and other modifications. I've heard a developer to say, like, it kind of pays for itself, in terms of like their timelines and being able to get access to the project. So these are kind of anecdotal or things I've heard, and I think one of the things we'd like to get more, more interview evidence and more, actual cost data to kind of help support that, and more of those stories and people talking to each other about those stories.
All right, we're coming up on the hour, Jasmine. I don't know if you wanted to close out now and then give people maybe a couple extra minutes if they wanted to stay over.
Yeah, I think we have just maybe one other point in the chat here that wasn't directly addressed, but just about, continuing to do kind of awareness work and education. And I think Chad addressed this quite well with the plug for those new toolkits. So just putting that out there and recognizing the dialogue in the chat. But yes, I think this is probably a good point to end. I want to thank you so much, Tom, for facilitating, and also the introduction to Chad, since I know that came out of a conversation that you all held in person. And everybody else for your attention and interest in this topic. We'll definitely be following up with all registrants with the slides. You can access all those links. And I believe in those slides, there's also contact information for our panelists today. So thank you all so much, Kristen, Laura, Chad, for your insight, and have a great rest of your afternoon, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Yep, bye-bye.